welcome to Hawk Talk. If some of you have been to some of the ones we've had before, but um, this is where we do some alumni career spotlights. That's hosted by the Career Development Center and Alumni Relations. My name is Davir Daniels. I'm actually a graduate student at Villanova, pursuing my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I had the opportunity to sneak in St. Joe's for a little bit to do my practicum experience and help them out in the Career Development Center. And it's been a great experience. So I'll be moderating our session today. Throughout this series, we've invited alumni to join us for conversations about their careers in order to give you insight into different career paths, industries, and to get advice on how to enter and thrive into these fields. These sessions will be recorded, so if you got friends who couldn't make it, just let them know that this session is recorded. And our guest today, man, we are so excited to have Tim Tabthong. So welcome, Tim. I want to tell you guys a little bit about Tim. He is a 2019 graduate from SJU with a double major in managing human capital and leadership ethics and sustainability, who works for Talentful as a talent partner. Tim has worked at Talentful for a few months, and prior to this role, he worked as a technical recruiter at Amazon. But while at SJU, Tim was active as an RA, a resident assistant, and a student office administrative assistant. And we are so excited to welcome Tim back to Hawk Hill. Tim, welcome. We have a list of about 10 questions I'll be asking you, followed by a 10 to 15 minute Q&A from all of our listeners. So students, while you're here, if any questions come up, please feel free just to type those in the chat, and we'll get to those questions at the end. I don't know about y'all, but I'm tired of talking. Y'all didn't come to hear me talk. So let's get started. Tim, the first question I have for you is, could you describe within your current role, just the core responsibilities and what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Yeah, of course. Well, first off, thanks for having me, Davir and SGU. Welcome me back to Hawk Hill, virtually at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, a little bit more about myself and what I do currently. Like Davir mentioned, I'm a talent partner with Talentful, and what my role is, in formalities, I'm a consultant to various different business groups. So right now, I'm currently consulting and contracted out with X, the Moonshot Factory, which is a subsidiary of the Alphabet Group. So, the same group that owns like Google, YouTube, that kind of nature. So a little bit of background on what X is. X, the Moonshot Factory, is essentially Alphabet's kind of incubator hub for various different like kind of sci-fi sounding projects. One project that we have going on is like called the Everyday Robot Project. So they're working on like, what do robots look like within the home?
Yeah.
And, you know, just go check them out, x.company.
Mm-hmm.
But so what I do as a talent partner with them is that I consult with them on their talent acquisition front. So essentially what I'm doing, I'm a sourcing specialist for them. And what I do within my role on the day-to-day is, meeting with like different business partners within the organization. I support one specific project right now, confidential, so I can't share too much about what I'm supporting there. But in my day-to-day, so meeting with different partners at the business, helping find engineering talent for them and helping build out their teams. Gotcha. So it's definitely, it sounds like a lot, but my role essentially right now is kind of twofold. I do a little bit of consulting with them, helping them figure out like what does their talent acquisition process look like, how can we improve it, and what are some like recommendations I can provide to them to better increase like our talent, whether it's talking about like our employee branding, talent branding, as well as like how can we make like the candidate experience when people are interviewing with us better. So that's like one facet. And then the other part of it that I touched upon is as a sourcing support. So a little bit more about like a higher overview of what talent acquisition is and the candidate life cycle. So you'll have several different components of it. Each kind of company will have like their own different process and how they go about doing it. But generally, you're going to have this timeline of like the organizations will figure out, all right, what jobs do we have, what do we need, and then the next part is the sourcing aspect. So how do we find that talent? How do we convince them to come into whatever organization that we're a part of? How do we convince them to interview? And then going through the assessment process, figuring out like, all right, are they going to be a good fit with us, and are we a good fit for these people that are interviewing with us? Are we part of their long-term plans? And then finally, like the closing part. So, after they've interviewed, they figure out, all right, you work with us, we work with you, what that all the kind of like complicated details of like, what does the opportunity look like? Like, where is it going? Where are you going to be working? How much are you going to be paid for it? Things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing that I thought about, one thing that I like to talk about with some of our students is, what are your passions? Like, there's this question that I ask everybody I come in contact with. It's what do you go to bed dreaming about, right? So with that in mind, when did you know that this was the career path that you wanted to pursue, and what kind of led you to that decision?
hmm Yeah, so I think for me, one of my passions is being able to work and help others. Really kind of taking those Jesuit values that were instilled with me at
Yeah.
St. Joe's and some of my prior education as well. So how I kind of got down that path, I figured out like, for me, it was a balancing act of like, what are things that I wanted to do, and then also what are things that allowed me to have a career, make a living, and be able to do what I want.
Yeah.
So at my time at St. Joe's, like you mentioned, I was a double major in managing human capital and leadership ethics and organizational sustainability. And in that time, I really figured out that like, the business aspect is like, obviously like businesses help kind of run, like keep the world kind of turning sometimes. And for me, I figured out in that path is like, yeah, I can do like some of the other like more analytical stuff where it's like analytics, accounting, finance, I can kind of crunch the numbers, but I figured out along the way that like, what for me, what really makes me passionate is being able to work with people.
Mhm.
So that's how I kind of figured out that like, with the managing human capital part, especially is like, all right, that's kind of where the realm that I feel most drawn to. And how I kind of got into talent acquisition was just purely through research and figuring out, like, all right, what
Yeah.
aspects are there within HR, human resources, and what can I have like the most immediate impact on,
Mhm.
especially right out of school. And talent acquisition is just one of those ones that is commonly touted as like one of the easier stepping stones to into an organization from an HR perspective.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I'm just curious. So excuse my ignorance, but I was a psych major,
Mhm.
right? Um, and one of the things that I ran into as a psych major was having this broad idea of, similar to you, I just love people and I just want to help people, right? So for students that maybe are in a place where they're like, all I really know is I love people, or maybe they have just a broad general idea. From hearing you speak, it sounds like you went through a process of having to narrow it down. What was that process like for you, taking a really broad thing and then narrowing it down to what you're doing now?
Mhm. Really great question, and oh man, you're really making me think here, to be so how I kind of went through that process, I think, one thing that was kind of told to me throughout my, especially like in the latter part of my life so far, is like really figuring out like what is it that really brings me passion and what do I enjoy. Um, going through that process of like, you know, I narrowed it so like, getting down to like, all right, I knew I wanted to work in people. I knew like generality, like HR and business is kind of like where most of that happens.
Right.
I kind of had to do my own research and digging and talking to like professionals, as well as like figuring out, all right, so what other aspects within HR are there? And people, it's like, if anyone has seen like The Office, you'll probably think of like Toby or something. And
Yeah.
you have like the procedural stuff, which like at the end of the day, like that's something that is really necessary in today's kind of age. Like, yeah, you'll have like the procedures, you'll have like compensation and benefits. But then on the other side, where we are looking more at that, like the human aspect of human resources, like,
Yeah.
the talent acquisition, the learning and development. Those are two things that really kind of drew my eye especially as I like got more involved on campus as well. One thing I learned along the way was like, as much as I like kind of doing just like, accomplishing tasks, reaching my own goals, I love to be able to see other people succeed.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I knew like, all right, I know that for me, I like accomplishing my goals, but seeing people happy, being able to help them figure out what they want to do really brought me kind of satisfaction. Which is where I kind of found like, that reward with like either with talent acquisition specifically, if like that's one of the most gratifying things about like my job.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm like sourcing and recruiting people and bringing them in, you know helping them get through this process, helping them figure out like, all right, this is where they want to be in the next part of their career, their life. um and then I get like that message back saying, hey, I'm really grateful, I'm really glad, I'm really happy, I'm really excited, all those positive terms of like, I'm really ready for this opportunity. And that's kind of what really, I was just talking with my senior recruiters
Mhm.
earlier this week, and he just mentioned offhandedly after we got someone accepting an offer, he was like, this feeling, I'm never going to get tired of it. No
Yeah.
matter how many people accept, agree to join us, work with us, I'm never going to get tired of this feeling of someone being happy to be working with us.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. And I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did, um, The Office, right? Anytime I think of HR, I only think of Toby. So,
Mhm.
so this is, I mean, this is really a selfish question, to be honest. Um, but how similar is HR to what we see with Toby?
Man, I think it's a hard question because like I'm gonna say like there are going to be like Toby's out there. There are
Yeah,
going to be like, there are going to be kind of environments and circumstances where that happens.
yeah,
Um, I think I can't really narrow down how often is it. It
mhm,
just really depends on like you really won't know until you kind of get into it, which
yeah,
I think that's scary to some people. And I agree. Like that's perfectly reasonable to have those kind of thoughts. Um, but I'm going to say that like I feel in my experiences so far that like Toby, the office HR experience, it's very narrow. Like it's not gonna be common. They're gonna be out there, but
yeah.
I don't think, I think that's something that's more on the extremes, like an outlier kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Moving on, I wanted to ask you this. So, what is the typical career path for an entry level associate within your organization? What does that
Mhm.
look like?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's going to be really common if you were to get into recruiting, especially at my organization, and just from my experience talking with like multiple different professionals in different industries, different companies, you're going to have a lot of people that quote unquote like fall into recruiting.
Yeah,
So, I think one thing that's a key kind of takeaway is that there's no direct one path. Like, it's not like accounting where it's like, all right, you have to get your CPA and then you can go work at like an accounting firm or a big four or like any sort of like small ones. I think
right.
with, you know, recruiting specifically, one thing that's pretty common is that like there's no really strong like certification. There's no like kind of degree that says, all right, this person got that, that piece of paper that says they can do it. All right, they can definitely do it. I think with recruiting, it's more of like we want to be able to see people who have that passion, who have like the skill sets to make it work.
Yeah.
So one thing I can do, I can lay out just a couple of different paths and how you can get there. So I know for myself, I'll say that I was relatively pretty lucky and privileged to be able to just like apply to Amazon and go straight into recruiting
Hmm.
with them as a technical sourcer. That's one kind of path, is just like hoping that you have done enough in your previous experience at school to, merit, an interview with them. Another path that's pretty common is going through like the recruiting coordinator route. So, one thing I talked about in my role specifically as like a sourcer, I'm more on the front end of like the talent acquisition life cycle. You'll have life cycle recruiters who are focused on more on that closing, like helping negotiate those deals.
Yeah.
Um, on the back end side of all of that, one really key component to talent acquisition is our recruiting coordinators. These are people who like are administrative wizards. They are scheduling wizards. They're able to help kind of making sure that like, they will have some interaction with candidates, but their primary responsibility is making sure that scheduling happens, making sure all of like everything's in order, and they're really like the backbone of an organization. And being a recruiting coordinator, with that one, in most kind of companies, you don't really need to have like any sort of like minimum qualifications. It's just more of like, we want to make sure that we see the skill sets are there. So namely like being really organized, organization, having great communication skills, problem solving. So that's the second route. And then like the third route where a lot of people can tend to fall into recruiting this way is like they find a career somewhere else. And they realize like, oh, this wasn't really for me. And then they realize like, maybe I want to just try something else. And I would say a lot of companies and businesses that are in like that growth stage, they're always looking for people to help hire.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good insight. Thank you for that. Um, Next question I have for you is, what do you enjoy the most about what you do, and what is something that you wish you could change?
hmm Yeah, so I think for me, I already mentioned it before, but
Mhm.
one of the things that I really enjoy about it is like, being able to help people find their career, find what they want to do next. And then another aspect to it is also the people that I'm surrounded with. Just because for me, I have found that like as much as I like working alongside people, I think what really keeps me happy on the day to day is being able to interact with a really like awesome group of people. I know that was my experience over at like my immediate team at Amazon, as well as like my team here at Talentful and X the Moonshot Factory. I would say that's probably like one of the most awesome things is just being surrounded by people that not only help you like succeed, but like they want to see you succeed and help you get there.
Right.
And then on that flip side, what are some things that I wish were a little bit different? I think with recruiting, because of that human aspect, that human nature aspect, there's not going to be one kind of concrete way to control everything.
Right.
With other kind of roles, whether it's like an analytics focused role, you kind of have an idea of like, all right, I know what I need to do to be able to accomplish this task. It may take a little bit of problem solving to figure out what you need to figure out, but you know that you'll come to some sort of conclusion and you can find a way to control it. Whereas with recruiting, you're working with human beings, you're working with individuals. Like, there's no like one size fits all method to it,
Yeah.
which some people will find frustrating. And, I think for me, that is like a thing that like I've had to learn and adapt to like, all right, even though like my method A worked with this person,
Right.
it's not going to work with another person. No matter how much work you put into something, at the end of the day, like sometimes you need to do what's best for the individual that you're working with. Um, like maybe you like realize, oh, this person would be a great fit for our team, but they might be a little bit too experienced, or like this is not exactly what they're looking for, and you have to make that trade-off of like, you know, I want to be able to fill this role, this position, but I know for a fact that this is not going to be best for the person that I'm recruiting in the long term. So kind of coming with that balance, and like you have hard decisions to make sometimes. You have hard conversations, which at the end of the day, it's something that you'll learn to manage. And it's not going to be perfect. Everyone's going to make mistakes. It's just how you kind of address it and move and learn and grow from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny that you say that because I feel like you're speaking to me, like to a situation um, that I've experienced. Like I hear you talking about this kind of this idea that there's a different path for everybody, right? Even tracking back to what we just talked about with typical career paths, that people have different journeys. Like for me, I talk to so many people, who are currently doing what I want to do because, in a way, I really want to see what's the blueprint. So I
Mhm.
guess what's the balance between, yeah, do your research, figure out, what the blueprint has been, but also, everybody has their own path and journey. So like I guess the question I'm asking is, how do you find that balance between the two? Like when you're trying to um find that career path, and then when you're actually in the job, how do you balance, I need the blueprint versus, but I have my own journey?
Yeah, I'll be honest. That's still something I'm figuring out personally for myself. And I don't think I've already mentioned it before. I don't think there's going to be a right answer for everyone.
Mm,
And I don't think anyone will actually ever find that answer. It's something that you're going to be working on, throughout your entire life. Someone once mentioned this concept to me of like, you're writing your book right now. You're gonna go back. You're gonna make revisions. You're never gonna make that final draft until it's done. You'll never see what that final draft looks like.
mhm,
But I think for most people, you have to figure out your values. One thing that I've kept in my mind since hearing about it, um, some people have you been through like different like leadership seminars or had Dr. Dufresne, for example, one thing that has mentioned a lot, especially in the business world, is Simon Sinek's why.
right.
Um, you have to really start with like, what is your why? What are you doing? Don't worry about like who is it, what product it is. Figuring out like why are you doing what you're doing,
Mm,
and from there things will fall into place. And I think that's kind of the first kind of key point is figuring out like, all right, based on my why, how does this blueprint fit in with my why? Does this aspect not work? All right, maybe I can adapt it here and there. And then sometimes it's just like, you can only do so much research.
mhm,
You're gonna have to take that leap of faith eventually. Like I can speak from my own experience. Like when I was first applying for jobs out of college, I grew up in New Orleans and went up to Philly for school. I imagined myself either going back down home down south or like staying in like the Northeast. I never would have imagined, even like the beginning of senior year, I never imagined myself moving out to Seattle working for Amazon.
yeah.
um, and then I worked there for a year and a half, and then I felt like it was a time for me to make a change. And I never imagined myself going down to like California, but in the next couple months I'll actually be moving down to San Francisco.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think you're going to have to make adjustments, and there's not going to be a perfect game plan. And even if you have a perfect game plan, you're going to need to change it. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And that is great advice. And I hope we caught on to that. This idea that we're all writing our own books and our own stories. And we won't know the finished product until it's actually finished. Right.
Mhm.
This idea that we have, I think we get caught up in thinking whatever we put on a page, that's final. Right. And we don't allow ourselves to go back and revise if needed. That was Wow, that was really good. Um, Next question I have for you: what has surprised you the most? So we've talked about maybe some of the good things, some of the things to improve. But has there been anything that has surprised you most about your career?
Yeah, I would say the thing that surprised me the most is how much things can change so quickly. I always feel like I'm answering like one question ahead, but with how this has gone, but like the story I just told about like not imagining myself moving out to Seattle, and then like when I first got the job with Amazon, first moved out here and like started working with them, I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to be here. Like Amazon's a really big company, really cool. I think I'm going to be here for like a good, like maybe 5, 10 years,
Yeah.
cruise and get that, get after. And then I didn't, I didn't imagine myself like leaving after a year and a half and working with another company like that's much smaller in scale compared to Amazon, and moving down to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But I think, that's the thing that surprises me is that there's so much change going on, and I've had to learn how to adapt and be flexible, and also learn when the timing is right. Um, you know, no one could have imagined that COVID-19 would happen in the way that it did,
Yeah.
and no one would say it was a smart idea to make a job change in the middle of a pandemic. But there are times when sometimes you have to throw logic out the window and you have to go with your gut feeling. And then, if it works out, it works out. I won't know if it works out until it's over.
Hmm.
So, and then even like within the job, as well back at Amazon and where I'm at now. Like I kind of went in having one idea of how it was going to go. It went like that for maybe the first few weeks, and then figure out like, okay, this is completely different than what I imagined. Um, and just kind of rolling with that punches and growing from it. Like, yeah, it's disappointing when things kind of don't go how you expect it to, but then, you got figure out that silver lining, take what you can away from it.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you talking about this adaptability, how things are always changing. It's funny. I used to work at Apple, right?
Mhm.
And I think between Apple and Amazon, I don't know if I've seen other companies that change so quickly. So I'm thinking about the person who is so detail oriented or so scheduled. They probably like they have scheduled out every minute of every day. What do you say to that person who also wants to step into this sphere when the possibility of change is so apparent?
Mhm. Yeah, like I definitely know a few folks who like it's a struggle to deal with like the ambiguity that you will experience working, at those kinds of like at a company like Apple or Amazon, or like big tech even.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, like it's going to be a hard adjustment to like reconcile that feeling of ambiguity and not knowing sometimes and having to adjust. The advice I would have for you is like figuring out like what is it for you that you need to have stable, and then prioritizing from there. Like, all right, I know like these are my like, this is my line of like I can't cross these lines. Like I need to be able to see where I'm going in like 5 years. I'm not, no one's going to judge you. That's how you choose to live your life, and that's how you feel like what you need to be able to grow.
Mhm.
So figuring out like, all right, I know that these are things that I need to be able to succeed.
Mm.
From there, figuring out, this is the hard part. Unfortunately, you have to kind of do your research, and you won't know until you start, getting out there, talking to people
Right.
of like, all right, what is it like in this company? Can I see myself working there? And like one thing that's mentioned a lot, in the business world and especially in talent acquisition is like, what is that work-life balance? Like, what does that company culture look like? And does it fit with your values?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, we could talk about that for hours. But I'd like to shift gears and focus a little bit about actions that students need to take. Right. So again, I just want to remind everybody, please, if you have questions, throw those in the chat. We'll get to those. But for now, I'm going to ask you about internships in a moment. But for now, what are 2 to 3 experience you would suggest students engage in while in college to help them prepare for entering the field when they graduate?
Mhm. Yeah, so I would say one thing that was really helpful for me was just being involved on campus.
Mhm.
I think especially when you are applying for like the entry level roles, like straight out of college,
Yeah,
like you're not going to have like the experience that like most employers will like state, and that's okay. What they want to be able, the reason why they put that is like they equate years of experience at this, with this certain job with like a certain skill set that they believe you will have after working x amount of years at this company.
right.
So, the important thing is like figuring out like, all right, maybe you're not going to get that internship, but figuring out like, what organizations can I get involved on in campus that allow me to cultivate that skill that I feel I would need in this job. So, whether it's joining if you're in Greek life, for example, sorority or fraternity, like maybe you're involved in some of that program planning for your organization. That shows that you're building skill set of like, you're communicating with multiple different offices. You are able to like organize effectively, putting together these different events, as well as like the teamwork that you're cultivating to be able to work with people. So that's one thing I would say is like just get involved. And it doesn't matter with what, just figure out what it is that you're, this goes into the second thing of like figuring out what you're passionate about as well. I mentioned before, like, what is that why for you? And I think college is and university, that's the perfect time to figure out like it's okay if you don't have the perfect answer. It doesn't have to be the answer for the rest of your life, but you need
Right.
to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So I guess those are kind of like the two things I would say like you can do right now at your university, at the university level, to prepare yourself.
Yeah, and, I'm always interested to hear um, about people's experience as an RA. I was an RA, so I always like to share stories, RA stories, and I'm wondering, um, what did being an RA do for you in your experience now?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say, being an RA definitely helped contribute in my growth and help me get to where I am today. That's for sure. One of those things, like I can probably list off like a long list of them, but like one thing is like, or being an RA, I had to be like highly organized, and learn how to prioritize my time correctly. I think that was like one big takeaway. And the second thing on that would be second biggest thing I would take away, which probably should be first, but oh well, was being able to interact with people and just learning how to have that empathy. And that's something that I know that I try my best to use every single day. Is like, making that kind of understanding, like, I'm not looking at this person as just like, resident number one, resident number two, but like, this is a human being. This is, Taylor, Alex,
Right.
like understanding how can I connect with them and relate with them, and then how can I communicate with them effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Um, my next question for you is, how did your SJU education impact how you work, and or the career decisions you've made to this point?
hmm Yeah, I would definitely say that, like, my time at SGU has definitely helped kind of shape and form, my way of thinking and how I approach the working world and how I approach the world in general. I think for me, I've had to learn how to keep an open mind, and learning, that flexibility that we mentioned earlier
Yeah.
of, it's okay if I have like these values that I find, are inflexible for myself. Um, but then understanding one thing that I took away specifically from like Dr. Dufresne's leadership class was, what this concept of what we call the perfect genius.
Mhm.
Everyone has their own method of thinking and how they rationalize things and why they think they're right.
Mm.
And I think before you can have a proper conversation in terms of figuring out a solution is understanding what their perspective is. Perspective taking is so huge, especially right now,
Yeah.
with things going, how things are in today's society. Um, I would definitely say that's like the number one thing that has helped me is just taking the right perspective and kind of shifting the frame a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Um, Now, I said we'll talk about internships, right? So, um, what type of internships should students try to secure to prepare for a role like yours in your industry?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, n- I would say probably the most straightforward kind of internship is being able to find something that is a internship in either recruitment or HR, just because like, those are what you learn there is going to be super transferable to, any professional role that you'll have if you choose to continue down the recruitment path. Um, I think you have to kind of approach it as like just as a learning experience, and maybe not just as like, oh, it's just something to fill my resume, but also like really kind of sitting down and understanding like, all right, what are the tangible things that I'm able to take away? Like I learned how to utilize like this one system, or I like, you showcase on your resume, like, all right, what are some things I did in my internship and how would I be using that in like a full-time role? And if you, so I would say that's the most direct path for internships. If you want to go like a different path, again, focus on internships that excite you and, really motivates you to learn and pick up like different skills along the way. Like I keep mentioning, like organization, being able to communicate effectively, problem solving. So even if you were to get an internship in something really different, like I don't know, like store management, for example.
Mhm.
Those skill sets that you pick up there, they're definitely going to be applicable to recruiting as well.
Yeah, yeah. And another, I'm gonna excuse myself again because I'm coming from the world of psychology, right?
Mhm.
So I know how it works for us, but I'm wondering for you, with internships, is that something that can turn into job positions, or is it usually separate things?
It definitely can happen.
Mhm.
So I will say that it's going to be a case by case situation.
Okay.
And timing. That's a really key thing. Just like timing in the situation. I know one of the internships that I had was with a small, staffing agency out in Bluebell. And I remember I did my internship with them this summer between my sophomore and junior. And they said, if you want to come back next year, and then, after you graduate, you want to come back to work with us,
Yeah.
by all means. And I think for them, they were able to do that because they're a little bit smaller. Oftentimes, so I've seen some of the internships, for example, at like Amazon, they would bring on people through doing a summer internship, and if they perform well, they're extended a full-time offer. So it can definitely happen. It's just, don't be offended sometimes if you feel like you've done a really great job and they don't offer it to you, because it may be one of those things that organization just isn't in a place to offer full-time employment for you after you graduate, because they may not have the structure that they feel like you would need to grow successfully with them.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And there's this phrase that I think we've all heard. It's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So what um is there validity to that in your sphere? Like, have you found that to be true?
I would say it's not everything, but it's one of those things. It doesn't hurt you to have people that you know within the industry. I think, going back, like number one, like they want to be able to see that you are going, like, in throughout the interview process, that you're going to be able to do the work that that they're asking of you.
Mhm.
But having those connections can really help, at least, kickstart and facilitate those conversations. So
Gotcha.
it's not everything, but it definitely helps.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. 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 So listen, as we come to a close, I have I think I have two final questions. I may have some follow-ups. We'll see. I can't promise that. But the first one, what is something that you wish someone told you when you were in school?
Hmm. I think I mentioned this one before earlier as well, but I think to sum it up, it's okay to not have a traditional path forward.
Okay.
It's okay if you have an idea and you have a plan. If you can follow through on it, that's great. But for those who had the idea and they can't follow through on it, that's okay too. I mean, I'm assuming most people that are going to be on this call are still going to be like in their really early 20s. You have a long time to work
Yeah.
if that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's you don't have to have everything perfect. Just
Mhm.
follow what you feel is best for you and your circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you just answered the second question I had. What is a piece of advice you would give to students who are interested in the path? Would it be similar?
Yeah, it would be pretty similar. I mean, like if I had to give concrete like advice, go look at this recording, go look at what I said earlier.
Yeah.
But have a plan, but be okay if it doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
It's okay if you have a plan B, plan C. If you had to go all the way to plan Z, that's how it works for some people.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Wow, wow. Well, listen, thank you so much. This was, I know I enjoyed it. And I really hope everybody got some good nuggets out of this. Actually, I haven't been looking at the chat, but this is the time for a little Q&A if we have some questions. So we can give some people a little time to maybe put some questions in there. Um, but yeah, we just want to, thank you, Tim, for joining us today and providing such great insight into your career. We're grateful for your time. We hope to see you back. Again, everybody just know this session is recorded. It will be available on YouTube in about a week. So make sure you're looking out at our YouTube page as well. And actually, I think I just saw one pop in the chat. Let me see. Um, Cool. So, was your first job out of college working at Amazon? Is the question.
It was.
Okay.
I remember I applied for them. So, and also don't be this is also some advice too, with when it comes to university recruiting and entry level, it's going to be really common if that stuff takes a while. Like, and just truthfully, I haven't had experience working directly with like university recruiting, but I know a few people who have, not just at Amazon but at other organizations too. When it comes to university recruiting, it's going to take a while, and I wish that was better. I guess that's one change I wish I could make, but you know, it's okay if it takes a little while, and sometimes you need to prioritize yourself too. So I remember I applied to Amazon's, I think at the beginning of January of my senior, in the second semester of my senior year. I didn't hear anything from them until like near the end of February saying, "Hey, we want to interview you." And
Yeah,
then so and then I interviewed with them like probably like 2 weeks after I got that email, and then I waited like another week before I heard anything back. And
yeah,
then I finally, so by the time I like signed my offer letter to work with Amazon, it was probably, I remember I was on spring break. It was probably like the second or third week of March.
wow,
So I applied at the beginning of January and I didn't actually secure anything until like midway through March. So, you know, don't be surprised if it takes some time. If you found the perfect position for you, great. Don't stop there. You keep looking until you have something.
yeah. Awesome, awesome. And I'm finding Amazon, because I had the same experience with Apple, where it
Yeah.
was like there was so much time, in between, like when I applied, when I interviewed,
Mhm.
all of those things. The last question I have is kind of still similar to that. Is that generally how things go, or is it different with different places?
I would say for the most part, that's how it's going to be different from everywhere that you go. Like some industries will naturally move a little bit faster, some will move a little bit slower. If we're strictly speaking about like like entry level kind of like university hiring and recruiting, from what I have seen, it's pretty common for things to take its time there. I would say, it's not against like you. It's just typically it's because they receive a lot of applications and they only have so many recruiters.
Yeah,
Um, and one thing I'll say, if recruiter advice for those who want to boost up their resume, those skill sets that I mentioned, make sure you have those things in your resume. Like go if you find a job description that you like for a job that you really want to do, look at like what those qualifications are, look at what the skill sets that they like your daily responsibilities in that job, and figure out if you've done that before in the past and how can you work that into your resume. A lot of companies, especially like the high tech ones, they're going to be using software that just does word detection. They're going to be looking for like exact matches. If you can get as much similar as you can, that just increases your chance of someone seeing it. And it's not about like the time. Sometimes it's about the timing of when you applied. A lot of times it's just like, we just want to see that you have that experience already doing that.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Um, well, that's all I have for you today, Tim. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, um, and we hope to see you again soon, Tim.
Thank you for having me, Davir.
Yes,
And
no
thank you for
problem.
everyone that came by. Make sure to check out the Career Development Center. Really great people there, really great resources for all of you. And if anyone wants to find me on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a connection. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back to you, but I have a lot of stuff that I need to organize in that realm too. So don't be offended if it takes me a little while to get back to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.